Hi everybody, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to more esports talk. I think a rising issue, especially for any FGC fans out there or Nintendo fans who think they need to support their pros and their esports competitors, and I could not believe more wholly in this. We're going to talk more on this in the future. We've already talked about this in the past as well, as clips did surface just this past weekend, kind of rehashing the same efforts we talked about, I would say, a few weeks back. That means Nintendo heads who came out and said they don't want to support esports because pretty much they don't have to. It's actually Liquid Hungrybox, and Hbox had some great words about this. I hope other pros speak up again about this as well from this past weekend about why Nintendo needs to support their esports pros, because if you guys know Nintendo esports pros from the FGC, they barely get by. A guy like Hbox has been competing for years and years and years, and until recent years as well, he was working side jobs, had to work a full-time job for a while as well, just to support his hobby. Yeah, it's crazy to see FGC pros. They call this a hobby because it's not a financial support system that any pro player can really have unless you're of the top caliber. And compared to other esports out there, they don't really typically have this issue, especially with the best of the best players barely getting by financially because the main developer or main publishing company, whatever it might be, just does not support their game financially from the esports side. Here's what Hbox had to say. Then we'll touch on what Nintendo said, but these words need to be listened to, and I think Nintendo needs to respond again to them. Here's what Hbox had to say.
I know this is probably a shot in the dark, but I'm going to try anyway because there's a lot of people watching. I really do wish if anyone from Nintendo corporate is watching this right now, if anyone's seeing the amount of excitement these sets can get and everything that goes with it, just give Melee a chance. Even if it's just Ultimate, support the Ultimate scene, support the Smash scene in general. You have people day in and day out streaming, making content, competing, going to tournaments, and we do it all grassroots. We have this like Beyond the Summit because they raise money, and that's great. But Nintendo, I need to say I love you guys, but you are the only one not putting in resources into the scene. Look at Capcom Cup, look at that celebration, look at every other game, look at Fortnite. This is the step that you're missing, and if you did that...
And these words have to hit home, especially for FGC fans, and I think they should for other esports fans as well. Can you imagine being a CSGO fan, a Fortnite fan, Rocket League, R6, League of Legends, whatever it might be? You're supporting your pro players out there, but they're barely getting by, and they barely can, go to every single event because either prize pool's not there, they got to pay for housing, they got to pay for travel, they got to pay for everything because, albeit unless you're the top of the level, they can be and actually signed to an organization who partially supports you just can't get by and do this full time. If you guys did miss this, we talked about Nintendo president himself coming forward, and I'll probably try and translate how we saw it as a team here, how we read them saying they don't need to contribute to their esports. How I read it was because they want it to be competitive for everybody. If they start funding esports, then all of a sudden you have these pros who rush to the top because if they can do it and only play this game and only be supported financially from a single game, all of a sudden you have a few of a tiny group being very good, and it's not an esports competitive for the giant community. If they do not support the community, therefore there's less prize pools, there's less reason to actually have pro players dedicate their entire lives to the game, and thus it becomes competitive to a wider variety of people. And when I heard that, I thought, maybe that makes sense to a very small few people, and maybe that's great for people who love to travel around randomly and, casuals off the street can compete with the top level of pros because there are no fully dedicated pros. I think to most people out there, that is the stupidest statement I have heard in a long time. You, as a billion-dollar company who probably only would financially succeed even further, although I cannot confirm that, by supporting the esports competitive side, you are deciding not to put a menial amount of money towards supporting your pro players and your esports players because you believe your game should be casually competitive from the top level all the way down to the street player. I don't like that reasoning. It baffles me that we have tons of fighting game pros out there, the lineup out there, the pros who can actually dedicate their lives and spend their entire lives playing and only playing this game is minuscule. It's probably on a couple hands you can count the lucky few who can do so, as compared to Fortnite. You know what I covered a month ago? I covered a guy named FaZe Sway, who, by the way, I believe at the time was 15 years old. He bought his mom a house within the first 2 years of playing Fortnite competitive, and that's not really mainly from big events. That's from cash cups. That's from these small FNCS, these weekly challenges. He bought his mom a house. Another one, Ghost Aiden, also a teenager, by the way, paid off his entire mom's college tuition Meanwhile, in EVO Japan, we got pro players who place first winning a controller, albeit there are certain restrictions around that event which don't allow the prize pools to be as large as they can be elsewhere. But let's be honest here, guys, even for the biggest fighting events in the entire world, pros aren't coming away wealthy as compared to, yes, it might be a rarity what Epic Games does with Fortnite. In their first 2 years, they've dumped triple-digit millions into the scene. Even Valve, who I would say is pretty stingy compared to most, gives up a couple $1 million majors. When it comes time for Nintendo, what do they fork up? It's just not fair. If you are a fan of the esport or esports in general, you should be pushing for an esports competitive scene and to support these pro players who want to dedicate their lives to the game, but simply can't because the developer over at Nintendo, they're like, you know what? We just don't need it, so we're not going to do it. Albeit, I got to respect their decision from some certain standpoint, but you have pro players who are trying to literally survive, and you're not giving anything for them. You completely rely on third-party organizers who, by the way, don't also want to push into a scene if even Nintendo doesn't want to back it up. You know, why would they, right? There's not a lot of return there for TOs who are trying to combat all of this on their own without the help of the main company, Nintendo. It's crazy to me. I hope HBox and his words go a bit more viral as they already have on Twitter. And I will continue to cover this as well here, guys, because it is very disappointing to see such a wealthy company who could all the more succeed by helping out their esports scene decide to keep their hands off and simply not even touch it. What do you guys think about this? Super curious on your thoughts as well. Until next time, as always, breaking down esports gaming news here every single day, all day long. Until next time, take care. I'll see you guys back here soon.